Hello and welcome to today's webinar, AP Process a Little Frozen, Let It Go with Automation in JDE. A couple of housekeeping points before we begin. My name is Alana and I am the Marketing and Administrative Assistant for Team Kane Solutions Inc. and ISP3. I will be your host today and will pass along any of your questions to our presenters throughout the session. You may submit questions at any time via the GoToWebinar chat box. You will be receiving a link to the recording of today's webinar, and it should be made available by end of day tomorrow on our YouTube channel. And also, after the webinar today, we would really appreciate it if you could just take a moment to fill out our exit survey. This gives us an idea as to which topics are relevant to you and where we might improve for future presentations. Any and all feedback is most welcome. So with that, I will pass it on over to our presenters to tell us more about themselves and carry on with today's session. So thank you for joining us today, Joost and Richard.
Thank you, Alana. Richard and I are very enthused to host this webinar together with Team Kane today. We're equally enthused to have the audience attend and explore the only end-to-end financial suite embedded within JDE Edwards EnterpriseOne. So let's get started with the introductions. My name is Joost Engel, Senior VP of Business Development at the Scanman Business Unit. With me is Richard van der Bospoort, our Senior VP. Richard dates back about 10 to 15 years with JDE Edwards, so he combines a lot of JDE Edwards knowledge together with the history in accounting. So best of both worlds, and today Richard will be providing our live system demo. First off, we'll go through a slide deck explaining what our solution is and what it does. So let's get started. Many organizations struggle with efficiently processing their invoices, which is costly for your company and can be frustrating for your suppliers as well. Manual paper-based AP processes typically result in data entry errors, stalled approvals, delayed payments, and missing payment discounts. Not to mention that these outdated processes are cumbersome, error-sensitive, and they lack the visibility and auditability you need today. Today's finance departments require solutions that help increase efficiency and accuracy, enhance process visibility, and improve your auditability. There's a wide selection of third-party tooling on the market today, and typically they all come with an expensive price point, and they're paired with long implementation projects, complex IT architectures, and high maintenance costs, all of which makes obtaining your rapid ROI challenging. Unlike any other finance automation suite, Scamman is completely native to JDE Edwards. It's been completely developed within the JDE Edwards toolset, and it's best considered as an additional EnterpriseOne module. So it's an out-of-the-box solution that is seamlessly integrated to any and all other JDE Edwards modules without any integrations or synchronization of data at any point. With Scamman, your AP staff, project managers, contract administrators, accounts payable staff, approvers, treasury, and any other employees or departments, they all work within one single application and one single database, JDE Edwards EnterpriseOne. Scamman modernizes, automates, and optimizes your EnterpriseOne processes by seamlessly integrating procurement, AP, and AR. Scamman solutions, they don't just look like JDE Edwards, they actually are JDE Edwards. All of which means that you're able to modernize the way that you interact with your vendors, banks, and auditors, all from within EnterpriseOne. Today's webinar will focus on accounts payable automation. However, for those of you looking to climb the automation stairway, it's good to note that our finance suite includes modules for automated payments with your banks, providing secure XML payment files to any and all local banks. AR automation to automatically process your bank statements and bank reconciliation activities, and vendor portals, which can include providing invoice statuses for supplier reference, issuing POs to vendors, and any vendor onboarding workflow requirements that you may have. Since our product launch in 2015, our solutions have been implemented globally. Our customer list includes clients in the United States, Canada, Australia, China, and across Europe. So today, tens of thousands of invoices, bank statements, and payments are managed using the Scamman finance solutions. In this webinar, we'll zoom in on accounts payable automation, and we define AP automation as automated invoice collection, intelligent data capture by OCR, electronic invoice approval workflows, automated 2- and 3-way matching, and exception handling processes. Scamman Financial Solutions should be viewed as part of your digital transformation, transforming your manual processes into electronic, streamlined, and integrated workflows. Our objective is implementing Scamman is to increase efficiency and compliancy, reduce the costs associated with processing and paying vendor invoices, and of course, increase the speed at which invoice volumes are managed. As compared to paper-based systems, our customers can attest to the fact that Scamman clearly achieves those objectives, making for favorable ROIs. Let's have a high-level glance at what Scamman is comprised of. Scamman is an all-native JDE Edwards technology, making smart use of your investment in JDE Edwards by leveraging standard components such as the Business Services Server, the AAS Server, UX1 components including E1 Pages, Cafe1 and watch lists, and the E1 Voucher Match application. And although these are great building blocks provided by Oracle, there were many gaps for us to fill. So Forza Consulting has its own Oracle validated product code to develop software in, which means that when you upgrade E1, your Scamman product will not be impacted. It will remain compatible with any and all future releases of JDE Edwards and is compatible as of applications release 9.0, 9.1, 9.2, and as of tools release 9.1.5. So it's very different than any customization that we're delivering here. There's no retrofitting involved for the customer whatsoever. In addition, Scamman seamlessly connects to your E1 processes, in example, your procurement process, as it's all JDE Edwards. Scamman also delivers direct access to your E1 master data, in example, for allowing us to directly validate and look up data in the JDE Edwards address book, supplier ledger, or any other relevant data without the need for any integrations or data synchronization. There's a single database, a single application, JDE Edwards EnterpriseOne. So Scamman truly is a single source of truth system. Finally, we ship Scamman with the best-in-class OCR engine. This OCR engine is capable of capturing any and all invoice fields. Compared to defining templates per supplier, which can be time-consuming and tedious, and translates into higher costs, our template-free approach delivers the quickest implementation, highest recognition rates, and lowest maintenance costs. Scamman covers your entire invoice life cycle, from the moment the invoice has been received up until it has obtained a final approval for payment. Once received, your invoice will be captured in JDE Edwards and it will never leave your system again, ensuring for complete process visibility with a full audit trail. On the left-hand side, we see three different ways of receiving your invoices. We have digital invoices or e-invoices. We have the emails with PDF attachments, and of course your paper-based invoices. So how does it all work? Starting off with the e-invoices or digital invoice documents such as UBL, Unified Business Language, or XML formats. These digital formats provide the highest grade of automation possible. The invoice documents are automatically collected and the digital data is directly imported and processed in EnterpriseOne. Without needing any user action or validation, invoices are routed for approval or automatically matched. Second are the PDF invoices received by email. Scamman automatically collects the PDF attachments and processes these through the OCR engine. The OCR engine is where we convert your invoices into electronic JDE Edwards data. The JDE Edwards entry fields are then pre-populated with the corresponding invoice data from the invoice. And once in JDE Edwards, the invoice data and the image of the invoice will be available throughout the process. Finally, the paper-based invoices. These are scanned to a network directory or email address and are also automatically captured and processed by OCR. Invoice verification, coding, matching, approval workflows, and reporting, it's all done directly in EnterpriseOne. All invoice data is stored in a single JDE Edwards repository, allowing you to leverage your E1 reporting solution to run reports, or alternatively, leverage our standard set. Since all activities are performed in JDE Edwards, standard E1 security applies and an extensive audit trail is generated from the moment that we collect an invoice up until the moment in time where it's approved for final payment. OCR scanning and recognition. Scanman leverages one of the best and most powerful OCR solutions on the market today called ABI. And this OCR engine is capable of reading any and all fields on an invoice, ranging from invoice header information to detailed line items, and from printed text to handwriting and barcodes. Fields can include words, amounts, dates, pictures, stamps, address lines, email addresses, web addresses. Virtually any and all fields on an invoice can be captured. We've added a unique touch to the OCR engine by developing an invoice reference library. This means that there's a database which contains a variety of invoice reference fields, or rather keywords, found on your AP invoices. So rather than maintaining a template per supplier, where you have to train the OCR engine as to where to find specific information on an invoice, Scamman automatically recognizes a reference keyword no matter what their location or orientation is on the invoice, and it will find the associated value. So let's take an example. We'll take invoice number. Once the keyword has been identified, the solution knows that there's a 90% probability to retrieve the actual invoice number from a position to the right of the keyword. If the invoice number isn't found to the right, the solution understands the next most probable location to retrieve the actual invoice number might be below, to the left, or even above the keyword. Included in the keyword database are multiple languages, multiple variety of keywords, so your vendors can refer to invoice number in multiple ways and can abbreviate it in multiple ways. However, it may occur that an invoice reference is not included in the database right away. But don't worry, because invoice keywords can be directly added from within JDE AdWords by the user, ensuring that the invoice from this particular supplier is automatically processed the next time it's received. Also included in the OCR engine are many algorithms, built-in intelligence, and all of this ensures that the system recognizes the correct data that it's looking for, and that it will pre-populate the correct information into JDE AdWords. The final aspect of the OCR process is recognizing your supplier. Identifying your supplier is a vital part of the processing of your invoice, and as Scanman is built within the JDE AdWords toolset, we can use multiple invoice tags to retrieve the supplier information directly from the supplier ledger, or even from the address book. For example, we can use the supplier name, address line, tax ID number, email, address, web addresses, or any other unique reference on the invoice that is stored within your EnterpriseOne database and is also mentioned on the invoice number or on the invoice sample. It's not a matter of selecting a single identifier. We can build a hierarchy here where the system will first look for an address line or a tax ID, followed by the supplier name, followed by the web address. Let's zoom in on the user interface. Your AP staff will literally just log into JDE AdWords and open a split screen application leveraging Cafe One technology, which you can see on the screen at this moment. On the right hand side of the screen, we display an image of the scanned invoice, which can be detached and displayed on a second monitor. On the left hand side, we see all the data that's been captured from the invoice by OCR. We see an import value, which is the OCR value, and we see a process value, which is the value that has been cross-referenced directly to the JDE AdWords database. We do cross-references on company ID, supplier number, and of course we check for duplicate invoice numbers in JDE AdWords for the particular supplier providing this invoice. We also translate the data into the appropriate JDE AdWords date format. And we've captured the currency for this supplier, not by using OCR, but by directly fetching it from the supplier ledger. All that AP has to do here is visually verify that the OCR engine has captured the correct amounts and that the other data is correct as well. And when it is, they hit the button Save and Process Voucher, at which point this particular invoice will flow through the system for processing, either to an approval workflow or to the voucher match application for matching purposes. If the AP team needs to override data at any stage, they can do so, and they can also kick off workflows to override the predefined workflows in your system. As you will learn, Scamman is very flexible and a very intuitive solution. Approvals. Let's review the options regarding the approval workflow process. Approvals are supported directly within E1 through email notifications and also through the mobile platform using the mobile approval app. We'll zoom in on all three of these. For JDE AdWords users, we have an E1 page displaying the AP invoice process flow with buttons that display a flag and a counter using the watchlist functionality. In this case, the voucher approval button has a flag and a counter 2 below it, which indicates that this particular approver has 2 vouchers to approve. The approver clicks the voucher approval button and the Work with Voucher Approval application will open. Here we see the 2 invoices that need approval. As soon as we click an invoice image will appear for visual verification purposes prior to approving the actual invoice. What else can we do but approve an invoice? Well, we can reject an invoice. If we're going to reject an invoice, we're going to ask for a mandatory rejection reason, which is a drop-down menu with a predefined options, which can range from 3 to 5 different options. Why do we do this? Well, if this invoice is going to be rejected, it's going into an exception handling process, and it's good for the person next in line to process the exceptions to know why it's been rejected and the appropriate actions to take. What else can we do? Well, we can start a Q&A session with someone else in the organization. So let's say I need to approve this invoice and I would like Richard's input on it. I can send a question to Richard using the system, and Richard can respond to it, after which I can either approve or reject the invoice accordingly. We also build in delegation options, which means that if I'm going on holidays, I can put in the dates from which I'll be on leave, and then automatically my workflow or approval workflow is redesigned and will go to someone else in the organization with the same approval hierarchy as myself. Then there's the email notifications. Our email notifications are there to replace the watch list functionality within EnterpriseOne. So for those users and for those users that do not work with JDE Adverts on a daily basis. So these are to replace the visual assists in the system. Basically, it's an HTML-based template, which means that we design it during implementation in accordance to what our clients would want it to look like. So we include their own logos and typically a customized text. What they all have in common is the button at the bottom side of the screen, which says Scanman Invoice. If I click that button, I'm either directed to the Work with Voucher Approval application in JDE Adverts that we've just seen, or we can route it to the mobile app. The mobile app connects to JDE Adverts or to Scanman using the AIS server, once again a standard Oracle component. The benefit here is that you don't need any JDE Adverts licenses to run this application. So those users that do approve invoices however, are not licensed for JDE Adverts, they can still approve invoices with the mobile app. It's a matter of logging in using your credentials, and you'll see a similar work list as that we've seen in JDE Adverts, a list of invoices that need approval. We click on an invoice and we have a green check mark to approve and a red X to reject. Once again, we'll ask you for the rejection reason, and then the invoice is processed. We can also pull up the invoice image, and we can also start the Q&A functionality with someone else in the organization. Everything works in real time, and it's a 100% duplication of the functionality that we have available within EnterpriseOne. So this is for the non-PO based invoices that need approval. So what do we do with the PO based invoices? Well, we use the voucher match application delivered by Oracle. Oracle delivered their system with 7 standard scenarios out of the box. And when we rolled out our solution on a global scale and across multiple industries, we found out that those don't necessarily meet the matching requirements of our clients, which meant this resulted in a lot of exceptions or mismatches. So what we've done is we've built or developed our own matching scenarios. So we've built functionality to work with landed costs. We've built a scenario where we can work with freight lines, where we can have a match on total order amount rather than standard on detail lines. We can work with an approval routing after the match, which we typically see in municipalities. We can work with two-way matching and match without quantities. We've built additional applications as well. So we've built a Q&A functionality within the matching scenarios to resolve any mismatches. And we've also developed a VMA workbench. And this is a workbench where all mismatches end up in. And it's more than just gathering all the mismatches. This application will directly identify as to why a certain mismatch occurred and on what line level that may have been. So it will alert you there's been a mismatch on this invoice. It's on line 63 and it's due to a price difference or a quantity difference or for any other reason. With that, I'm going to hand the floor to Richard, who's going to take us for a test drive through the software. He's going to take us through a few scenarios showing what the system can do. He will be a super user, which means that he's got every single feature and functionality available within the product available to him. Of course, during implementation, we'll take into account what kind of job role someone has, and we'll tailor the screens to those specific requirements. Richard, on to you.
Thank you, Joost. Okay, thanks, Joost. So what I will do, I will perform the demonstration. As a preparation for this demo, I did send 2 invoices to a designated email box, and they will appear in a minute in JDE. As Joost explained, I will be a AP administrator, meaning that I'm going to log in without any security and have, as said, every single feature to my disposal. We end up starting with a E1 page, as we see here, and this does represent a business process flow that we can configure. So if we look on the left, we see the ways that invoices are being included into the business process. As said, we monitor email folders or email boxes, 1 or more. As soon as an email is received, the next moment that the invoice is visible is inside JDE. The same applies for monitoring network folders, cloud folders, document management solutions. As soon as we put an invoice there, or someone else does for you, then that invoice will be visible inside JDE as well. And last but not least, on top we see manual upload, meaning that also if there is an alternative route, we can include invoices into the business process. As said, the Scamman workbench, that's the heart of our application, and there we will see those invoices in a minute. If we look at the business process that we are going to demonstrate today, first of all, I will go into a non-purchase order related invoice, which means that this invoice is going through an approval route. And this approval route does include asking individuals in the organization where to code the invoice, like a budget owner, head of a department, those kind of roles. And from there, we are going to push the invoice through a approval hierarchy, meaning that with an amount threshold, first of all, 1 user needs to approve the invoice via the email, and the second approver will approve via a mobile application. The second demo that I'm going to perform is a purchase order related invoice, and it is represented in this business process flow by going upwards, meaning that as soon as we find an invoice with a purchase order number and we are giving the supplier the privilege to automate the matching process to the fullest extent, then that invoice will be matched without any user intervention other than verification, and only exceptions need to be managed. Okay, so as said, I did send 2 invoices to a designated email box, and they are now visible in the Scamman workbench. This is the 3-screen application Joost also showed in his PowerPoint deck, where on the right-hand side we have a picture of the invoice. In the middle, we see a work list, and on the left, we see the data that we have been extracting from the invoice and that we are going to use in our processes. Again, this application or this form is having a lot of information, and that's due to the fact that it is not configured to a specific business process. Out of the box, we do ship 7 different scenarios related to working your way through invoices, and I will explain a little bit more on that in a later part of the demo. So first of all, let's have a look at the image viewer. We can detach the viewer, and that's quite convenient if you would like to work with 2 monitors. If that's the case, then we are going to, of course, not show the picture here. We can zoom in, we can zoom out, and we can, of course, look at multiple pages. In the middle, we see the work list of invoices, and this list does contain all the invoices since we are using Scanman. So this means that we need to be able to filter those invoices based on the job role, and that's done by statuses. The statuses are extensive, and they are both shipped with the solution as well as configurable. So as said, we do deliver 7 out-of-the-box scenarios, but if there is any reason for including an additional workflow step tailored to your business process, we can also include additional workflow steps. If a user logs in, he or she will see only those invoices applicable to the job role that he or she needs to perform. So for example, what we are going to do in a minute is verify if the OCR engine did its work correctly. So this means that the user will only see, and I will show that here, those invoices that do apply this specific status. But I will go back to all. We have a very extensive audit trail, meaning that we can see everything that's going on with that invoice. And an example is shown on top here. Where did the invoice come from? Well, it was sent by Richard from an email address and with a subject Team Kane webinar. Why is that information here? Because as said, I'm a super user, so I see everything. And this is something that we tailor. On the OCR recognition, let's do a deep dive here. So first of all, I will zoom in to the header section of this invoice. So we are pretty interested in, or actually we need to figure out all the header fields. So we start off with the invoice date. The invoice date, as said, the recognized value on the invoice is found here, 12 February 2019. How did we find that? A rectangle around the invoice date box or a keyword, and then we find automatically the date. And that's what we see here. This is not the date that we can use if we are going to create a voucher in JDE. So we need to enrich the information that we found in such a way that it is usable by the applications that create and the functions that create a voucher. So what we do here, we change the wording into numeric values, and also in this particular example, it's a European date format, which we have flipped into a US-based format based on the company that we have found. So we find information and we enrich it. Another important component is the invoice number that we need to find. And if we see here invoice number, the same rectangle has been drawn around the keywords, and we did find 190222. That's the value that we recognized, and that's also, of course, the value that we are going to use. But what we do see here is that we do apply all JDE business rules. So in this particular example, we check if this supplier did send an invoice with the same number before. We just generate the standard JDE message saying that this is a warning. We could have flagged it as an error, and then automatically it would flow in an exception handling process. The supplier number, we also need to find on the invoice. Typically, the 5-digit supplier number is not on the invoice, but as explained by Joost, every single value that you have in your address book, we can use to figure out what the supplier number actually is. So in this particular example, I used the tax ID, which we found on the invoice, which is unique, but I could have used any value: Chamber of Commerce number, bank account number, address line, name of the supplier, phone number, email address, as long as it is unique and with a reference to our address book. So we did find that as well. Last but not least, if we enter an invoice, we also need the 5-digit company code. We see here that automatically the system found 000260. How did we find this? Also, again, by any unique characteristic we see on the invoice. In this particular example, what we have used is the legal entity name, Forza Consulting BV. But we could have used any unique characteristic, such as Mr. Joost Engel, the address line, the postal code. Even the Netherlands would be something that we could use to populate this one automatically. I'm going to perform the first step of the invoice automation. So after the invoice has been received, I'm going to verify if the OCR engine did its work correctly. So I need to do that by reserving this invoice. Why do I need to reserve this invoice? Because several other individuals can work at the same list at the same time. So I have to reserve this invoice for me. I do this by clicking a checkbox. By clicking the checkbox, we will see that the fields become editable. So if there was something wrong, we can change it. Every single field, as said, is being applied against or checked against the standard JDE business rules. Every single field that you can populate via and manually in JDE, we can also populate via the Scanman workbench, meaning that if we would like to have a remark or a reference fetched from the invoice and there is logic to be able to do that, we can also populate it. We didn't find a purchase order number because that's the second scenario. On the other related header fields are either found or enriched based on the information we see on top. Then we need to focus on the amount field. So if we look on the bottom section of an invoice, typically we will find the amount fields there, also in this scenario. And here we have the same concept. So we show what value we see on the invoice and also the value that we are going to use. Typically, what we will do during configuration is just hide this field. But this is here for a reason and to show you the capabilities of our audit trail. So if I would change a field, then we see that the gross OCR value becomes red. Why is this? Because we monitor changes to important fields like amounts, but also we measure the performance of the OCR engine. So if we make changes, then there might be something wrong either with this supplier, with this invoice, or with the OCR recognition rate. So we keep track of that. As said, every single business rule does apply. So if this has a calculation issue, then it will not be able to continue, as well as that we do allow tolerances to be set. We see here 5 different lines. This means that we can work with at least 5 different taxes per invoice. Automatically, we grab the gross value, the tax value, and also the taxable value, and automatically the correct tax rate area will be found. What's next? The user doing verification, he or she has validated if everything is okay, and now we have to choose the next workflow step. The system will do this fully automatically, meaning that the user just presses a button either here or on top, and then the next workflow step will be initiated. In this particular scenario, what we have said is that we do expect a purchase order for every single invoice. In this case, it's not true. So what I can do in this scenario as a super user, say, okay, I'm going for another scenario. And the other scenario is what we call GL coding. And GL coding is ask someone in the organization where to code the invoice to, because it's not with a purchase order. So we can send out a notification to an to a budget owner or head of a department, a project manager, to ask him to code where to code this invoice. And also here we have several business processes we support. So we can say, okay, as soon as we have coded the invoice, then we are going to create the voucher, or we are going to code the invoice, do the approvals, and create the voucher. And also what we could do, and that's what we see here, create a logged voucher, which is a preliminary status. So all those kind of things are configured, and based on the configuration set in the system will decide what the next workflow step will be. And in this case, it's going to code that invoice. So the user just presses save and process. And then in this particular example, what I will do is I will code the invoice immediately on the AP department. Why is that? Because I prevent one workflow step going to send out this a notification to a user in the organization to code it. And what do we see? Again, the picture of the invoice is always one mouse click away, so I will just move it. We see here that we can code this invoice to 1 or more lines. This means that we can select every single account as long as we have the privilege for that, and code this invoice to. Every single field we have available inside JDE, we can also use here, like asset numbers, subledgers, cost components, cost objects, all those kind of things. As said, we can code it to 1 or more lines. What else is interesting? Here we see an automated approval route code selected. This means that based on demo, this will go through a approval hierarchy. And this approval hierarchy starts with Joost Engel, because he has a $1 to $50 amount threshold, and above that it's me. So I can show you a 2-tier approval hierarchy. So how did we end up with this particular demo approval route code? We ended up here by looking at information we see here on the screen. For example, we could have used the company number, we could have used the supplier number, we could have used the business unit, the object account, or the whole account ID. In this particular example, we have used the supplier number. We can also combine that. What does it mean? So for example, every single invoice from the pizza factory goes into Joost Engel's his department, with the exception of the ones that are coded to business unit 261. And all the other components can be used to streamline that process. Bear in mind, I'm an AP clerk doing the verification. So what I need to do is just press OK after validating what I see here. Why did we automatically populate an account number? Because this is the number that, for example, this invoice was coded before, or it's the default expense account that we have used. So the user can just press OK, and then the workflow will be initiated. The workflow is initiated, and we see here the status, voucher processed, workflow started, and the something green, so this means everything went well. In this particular example, I've chosen to create the voucher as soon as a account has been chosen. So let's have a look at the voucher itself, view voucher. Move this to the side. So the voucher is created. It's just an ordinary voucher if you would have entered it manually. That's what we see here. If we look at the paperclip up front, this is a link to the original document as how you have received it from your supplier or how you scanned it originally. You can store this physical document either in a media object file in JDE or on a cloud storage, network location, document management solution, SharePoint. That's up to you to decide. What else do we see? On the right hand side, another button, and this is a button that will give you access to this picture or this invoice without pressing the attachment. That's one advantage. Another advantage is that on every form inside JDE where you have document number, document type, document company, you can just go for this picture. Not only here, but also in account ledger inquiry applications or forms during the payment process, wherever you have those unique keys. If we look to the pay status, the pay status is on hold. Although we created the voucher at this moment in time, it's still not eligible for payment. And that's obvious because we need to push it through a approval hierarchy. So we could ask ourselves the question, where is this invoice as we speak? And there's another button on the right-hand side. And this button is giving me access to a form that is used by the AP administrators to check and to validate the approval process. So if we would like to ask ourselves the question, where is this invoice? That answer is given by this form. We see that Joost Engel is owner pending on this of this invoice. And why is that? Because the demo approval route code has been selected, and he is having an amount threshold of $1 to $50 for which he needs to approve invoices. Above that, it's me. Joost Engel. His user ID is associated with my email address, so I will get a notification in my email box. So let's have a look there, so that I can approve that invoice. Okay. Well, it seems that there's like a issue with the email not being forwarded to myself. Not a problem. So what I will do, I will just sign out and go into JDE immediately. 1 second. So I will log in as Joost Engel. Joost could have had a notification in his email box. By clicking it, he will go back into JDE where there is an application which is built for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is approving or rejecting invoices. Let me check the date of today. And here is that particular invoice that I'm really interested in, this one. He has a lot of invoices. He can search for his invoices directly from here. If he would go in, he would see the options that he has related to the invoice. He can approve an invoice, he can reject an invoice, he can ask a question to anyone in the organization, and he can put invoices on hold. If Joost Engel does put invoices on hold, typically we make it mandatory to give an on hold reason, so that we can inform our AP staff why this invoice is not either approved or rejected yet. We can ask a question to anyone else in the organization. That individual gets a message. As soon as that message is answered, you get a notification that there is an answer. The nice thing about it is that it's added to the audit trail. If we reject an invoice, we typically make it mandatory to give a rejection reason. Why is that? Because a follow-up action needs to be taken into account. For example, a notification, which could be automated, saying to your supplier, hey, there's something wrong with this invoice, and this is the reason because we keyed it in here. So we see only 3. We can make it 1. We can make it as many as you would like. In this example, I'm going to approve the invoice. And also here we have a list of options which could help us tailor specific approval process and workflows. There's one word mentioning, approve it for referral. This means that although it's Joost and myself in this approval hierarchy, we can still include a third individual, and not before he or she does approve the invoice, it will be eligible for payment. But I'll keep it simple here, it's approved. Bear in mind, I'm Joost, so I will say to Richard, hi Richard, this is fine. We see here attachment, so Joost can also look at the original attachment and he can add attachments. He presses OK, and then he goes back to the list and he can just work his way through the other invoices that he might need to work his way through. Let's go back to our role as AP administrator, so I will sign out. AP admin, log in as an AP admin, and let's see what happened to that particular invoice. So if I go back to the Scanman workbench and look at the invoice number, so it's down here, view voucher, then we'll see here that Joost Engel did approve the invoice with the comment he just made, hi Richard, this is fine. That invoice is now with me. So I should be able to approve this invoice via my mobile app. So I'll just show you that as well. And just go there, the mobile app, here it is. So what I will do, I will log in as myself, Richard, with my email address, with a password, and this combination is being moved into a secure cloud authentication service, or it can be guided to your, for example, Active Directory, and from there it's going to log in via AAS directly into JDE to the same application I just showed you when I performed Joost's approvals. So I log in, and as soon as I'm logging in, I'm in JDE, and I approve that by, in this particular example, I need to select a environment. If you only have one environment, of course, you will not have to do this. So I will go to the production environment, and I'll also have a long list of invoices. If the invoices are red, or the invoice numbers, then they are past due. If you are particularly interested in an invoice, you can just search for the supplier name or the number of the supplier. In this case, I'm looking for the specific invoice, which is 4767, and there it is. I can look at the image, and based on that, press the green button and approve it. If required, I can also look at additional information. I can put it also on hold here, ask a question, reject it. Also here, look at the image. I can look at the additional information that I need to be able to approve this invoice, such as the account information. In this scenario, I will just approve it. Bear in mind, I'm Joost. Oh, Richard. So I say, hi, Joost. Okay. So I made a small typo, but it doesn't matter. And also here, I can create or select a approval reason. As said, this is typically not made mandatory. I confirm, and then I'm going back to the list of invoices. As said, using the mobile app, I'm inside JDE, and that's will be visible here. So as soon as I press the find button, then we'll see that this invoice is also passed my approval with the comment, including the typo that I just made, with the comment and the reason I gave. The pay status, I need to refresh, it's JDE, is approved and eligible for payment. We have a pretty extensive audit trail, so not only what we see here related to the way that we are going to approve invoices, we see from an amount threshold point of view. We also have, and I'll go back to here, move this slider to the side, a lot of information on the invoice itself. So where did it came from, who originated, where did it originate from, and so forth and so on. But also we see down here the information related to the processes this invoice went through. So from the moment that we received the invoice up until did we edit the invoice, yes or no, when was the voucher created, how long did it take us to get this invoice through the approval workflows. Typically, this information will be hidden somewhere or behind a row exit. However, as said, in this particular AP admin role, I just see every single piece of information to my disposal immediately. This information, together with the information that I just showed you related to the audit trail on approvals, as well as the information you already have in your, for example, supplier ledger, it combined in business flows and business views that we deliver, so that you're able to report on every single element that is of interest within this particular business process. This concludes my demo on the non-purchase order related invoice. I will quickly show you the PO one, and that's the second invoice. So I will just go back to the image viewer again. What we see here is that it's the same invoice with two differences. One difference is that we have a order number 5441 and that we have line items that have rectangles around it, meaning that we are able to recognize those line items. Yeah. So how does that reflect to the other side, to the header fields? Those are the same, with the exception of the fact that we did find the purchase order number here. The purchase order number here, only one, doesn't reflect the fact that we can only work with one purchase order number per invoice, because if we look downwards, we see also that we have captured the line items within the column as well, a purchase order number. So this is giving also the option to work with several purchase order numbers on one invoice. What else did we see? The VMA supplier rule. So if we find a purchase order number, as well as that we have flagged the supplier to be eligible for a fully automated voucher match option, then we also can just push this invoice through, and without any other user intervention than verification, this invoice will be matched. In this particular case, Rule 99 is a rule that we have developed ourselves together with our customers, saying that we also do allow, for example, specific tolerances, as well as landed costs or additional audit charges, those kind of things. Okay, so what does this user need to do? Again, edit data and verify if the OCR engine did its work correctly. So actually, of course, it did. In JDE, the purchase order number is unique. So I have to override this purchase order number with a purchase order number that I can actually match. And this is something which gives me also the opportunity to show you that we are leveraging on every single piece of information we have inside JDE. So I can just go into the standard JDE purchase order list and select, if required, a different purchase order number, or if the OCR engine did it, read it correctly, we can just change it here. That's one thing. The second thing is, every single piece of control you might expect is in here as well. So for example, if you want us to check that this supplier number does belong to the supplier number, or the purchase order number does belong to the supplier number, we can do it. If you would like to be able to let the system validate to check if this purchase order number belongs to the company associated with, or the branch band associated with this company, we can do that as well. Why is that? Because we would like to prevent this verification step. So as soon as the system is more than enough confident that it did find all the relevant information, then you will not even have to validate this invoice. You will only go into exception handling if there is something wrong. Yeah. If you look at the line items, we also see that every single line item has been fetched correctly, like the quantities, the unit prices, the extended prices, and more information if required. And this again is very extensive. So we could have captured item numbers. We could have cross-referenced those item numbers with the supplier item numbers that you might have in your system. We can add lines that are not on the purchase order number, or not on that are not on the purchase order, and that we would like to include in the process, such as order costs, for example, or admin charges or freight charges. We can, if required, kick off already exception handling from here. We can enrich information with information from the purchase order or the receipt if required. But in this particular example, I will not do anything. I will just let the system perform the auto match. As said, we have a lot of controls. related to the purchase order number, related to all the standard JDE fields, but also to help out the verification and make it as automated as possible. So how does that work? One example. If you look at the invoice, we see here that the total amount of this invoice is 166.13. That's what we see here. If we look at the line items, we also see that the total of the line items is also 166.13. So the total of the lines. So this gives us, the confidence that the OCR engine was like 99.9% certain of every single line that he has captured. So this gives us the option to just press save and process voucher and then let the system perform the next workflow step. If we would have had like 50 lines, then it's obvious that such controls are needed to be able to quickly validate if information is correct or not. So again, from a user point of view, I select the invoice, I validate quickly, and I just press save and process voucher. By doing this, the next workflow step will be chosen. I will have to be quick. And in this particular example, what will happen is that this invoice is put into a preliminary status, saying voucher match automation in process. Why is that? Because we would like to let the system try to match this invoice for example, 2 days, and after that, we need to push it in an exception handling flow. Why do we have those kind of things? Yeah, to be able to support real life scenarios, such as a scenario where the invoice is received before all the goods are recorded correctly. And sometimes it takes a day or two before that is actually the situation, and that's why we would like to match only if we are able after 1 or 2 days. So in this particular example, if I press find again, it is matched immediately. Let me check. And let me go there to the voucher. Move the slider to the side. So the voucher is created immediately. Just an ordinary voucher as that we are used to if we would have matched it manually. A paperclip guiding me back to the original spot where this invoice is stored. On the right hand side, again, a picture of the invoice. And in this particular scenario, we have said that the invoice is updated to be to the approved for payment status, so eligible for payment. And that's why the box down here is empty. We could have associated an additional workflow related to this invoice if required. We could also have set a so-called suggestion mode, meaning that although the system did find a match, we still need to go through a approval. And we can also combine that with an amount threshold. So what could have happened in this example is that the Pizza Factory invoice, as I just showed you, is eligible for the automated match process, with the exception of invoices above $1,000, and those have to go through a suggestion mode before they are really eligible for payment. By saying this, I conclude my part of the demo. I will hand over the floor back to Joost.
Thank you, Richard. So we've seen what the system can do in a really brief overview. Of course, there's lots more to see and deep dives that we would love to take with you guys. So please feel free to coordinate that with our Team Kane partner. What we'd like to do is just briefly touch on the implementation approach. As said, it's an embedded system which delivers better ROIs than any other system due to the fact that it's just out of the box plug and play. So that is also reflected through our implementation approach. Very lean and mean approach where we start off with an AP analysis, which is where together with our client teams, we work on charting the actual to-be AP processes. So that takes into account as to how the approval workflow should be facilitated, what exception workflows there should be, and what matching scenarios need to be in place. That is something we document, which will result in a functional design, more or less. That is something that we'll take through the rest of the implementation with us. So while we do the AP analysis, our technical team can install the solution on your premise, which is typically like installing an ESU, which should be a very familiar process to the JDE Edwards community. Once that's been completed, we'll start the functional implementation, and this is where we configure our solution in accordance to the AP analysis that we did at the start. We'll do this in your JDE Edwards test environment, and as soon as we conclude that phase, it's time for your user training, which is where we bring them up to speed on how the application works and train them. That includes functional training, approval training, AP staff training, and OCR training. And once your staff has been trained, it's time for their UAT or user acceptance testing. And that is where your team actually validates that the processes and their day-to-day operations are supported in an optimum form. Once they conclude that it's time for your go live, and typically from start to finish, no more than 3 months lead time in total. There's a few clients that have seen this demo before, so a number of them are on the screen here. This is just a selection of some of our customers, just to highlight the variety of industries that Scamman has been adopted in. Naturally, all JDE Edwards customers, all different industries, different locations as well. So a lot of Canadian, United and American customers on here. Also some Chinese clients on here, European customers, and some in Australia as well. With that, we're going towards, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Alana for the wrap up.
Thank you, guys. That was really awesome. I had never seen the mobile app before, so that was really cool to actually see it in action. So thank you for showing that.
Cool.
We did have a couple of questions come in, so I'll just ask a couple of them. If you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them in the questions box. If we don't get to your question, I can always send them to Joost and Richard, and then I can email you the answer back. So just for Scanman, can it process invoices with multiple POs on them?
Yes, it can. That's not a problem.
Okay. And then where are approval route settings maintained?
They are maintained directly inside JDE Edwards. So what actually happens is, as soon as that the system is configured, every single option to configure, it's also at the disposal of the users. So it's just like configuring standard JDE Edwards.
Okay. And then finally, is the system compatible with localizations? We're looking for a single global solution.
Yeah, so every single localization which is shipped with standard Oracle and JDE Edwards is supported, as well as specifics related to invoice formats all across the globe.
Okay. All right, cool, thanks. So once again, if any other questions, just send them in. I'll just give a little brief bit about who ISP3 is. We are an Oracle Platinum partner specializing in JDE Edwards upgrades, migrations, and implementations. We are an Oracle customer ourselves, running EnterpriseOne 9.2 on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And as one of the first clients on Oracle Cloud, we can assure you that we are well equipped to guide you on your journey through 9.2 to cloud and beyond. We're all on this journey to 9.2030 together, and with the continuous delivery model, we're proud to be a reseller and services partner of a variety of business optimization products to help make that journey a little easier, like utilizing Scanman for invoice automation. So if you are interested in freeing up staff and cutting costs and improving your operational efficiencies, just let me know, and I can always send additional information about our other offerings. So go to the next slide then, please. Thank you. So that concludes our webinar for today. If you would like to discuss a personalized demo or your investment options, you can reach out to our senior advisor, Michael Guerin, his contact information is on the slide here, or you can easily pop something to me in the chat box and I can always pass the message on to Mike. Joost, Richard, are there any final thoughts or anything we should keep in mind for going forward?
I think we're all good, and we're definitely looking forward to any future sessions with the attendees of today. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you both for a great presentation, and thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate all of the post-webinar feedback on that survey as you exit, and we hope that you all have a great rest of your day.